Hello there, and welcome back to the Film Score Podcast. Today, my guest is Carla Patullo. Carla might actually be most known for a non-score album she recently did, and that's her album So She Howls, which won the Grammy earlier this year for Best Ambient New Age Chant Album. So, unsurprisingly, Carla and I spend a lot of time talking about that album. But really, and this is maybe a warning to some folks as well, a content warning, let's call it, as they call it. But what we talk about more with respect to that album is Carla's cancer diagnosis several years ago, her fight with cancer, and how that impacted and influenced, in general, her music process, her music career, but also led to the creation of this album in particular. And as we'll talk about it, the reason it generated or was the genesis for this album was that she had the concern that this might be her one last time to sing, her final, her last album. Fortunately, it isn't. And then in addition to So She Howls, Carla's also done a number of feature films, short films, and other similar work. We get into all that as well. Now you can find out more about Carla on her social media. Do the same for me. I think I've said this warning a few times. We're hitting the last few interviews of this season. Got some very big potential interviews in the works. Won't go into any more detail because, well, I don't want to jinx myself, but we'll see what happens. Until then, however, sit back and I hope you enjoy. Carla, thank you so much for joining me today. How have you been?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here as a listener. Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on, and like I mentioned it to you a minute ago. It always, I don't know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've gotten like maybe 80 interviews or something, and hearing that is still 80 interviews in, always surreal. So thank you for listening, and I'm glad I could turn you from a listener into a guest.
Thank you.
So obviously, like a lot of the work that you've been doing for the last, I don't know, several years at this point is in the film space. But let's hit the big thing first, right off the bat. You released an album, So She Howls, last year, and it won the Grammy for Best New Age Ambient Chant Album. And like, candidly, that seems like such a weird catch-all category because, like, you talk to people that make, ambient music, and they're like, no,
Yeah.
it's not really a thing. But, setting that aside,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Like it's definitely like a space I never thought I'd be in really because, the album came to me out of a real personal place where I had gone through breast cancer. And so it became an album of healing. And, I kind of discovered this healing space. And I think that's what brought me into, as people define the new age category. And so it's, it kind of just like, brought me there. And I think I kind of, like to think of my music as not really a specific genre because, as in film composing, we all seem to be genre fluid,
Yeah.
just so it also it had been an album that had been in the works for actually a few years and coming out of COVID, where we had the space to create our own work because a lot
Mm.
of other work was not happening.
So what was the genesis for it? How did it initially come to be and build momentum?
I actually 4 years ago, when I was, I had gotten diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was really depressed,
Yeah.
really and COVID was at the same time, so there wasn't really a lot of other work to keep me busy, and I just started, like, singing into my phone randomly, just trying to motivate myself, without even thinking it was gonna be an album really, is just, like, how I felt. And how music came to back to me in this very, like, fundamental way and fundamental need. It was just like this daily thing of, like, what I could do to feel better. And, as I was physically getting better and it was, like, paired with how my body was doing and how I was responding to treatment, the album started to evolve into an album,
Mm,
At first, I thought maybe this would be my last album, and this is just like what I'm like leaving behind. And then it like kind of, I knew I was going to finish it and I was feeling better. Treatment was working. And then it just kind of like step by step led to, well, I'm going to go collaborate with these musicians and I'm going to put this out there and share it with people and then eventually talk about it like right now. That's another part of this whole growing process, going through this whole journey tied in, yeah, to my personal life.
Those early aspects, you saying the idea of, oh, maybe this is my last album. It's such a fatal view of things. How did you, with that in your mind, motivate yourself to keep going versus just being like,
This is
what's
it.
the point? Yeah, exactly. I mean, really.
Well, I think at first it really just was that necessity of I got to get these sounds out of my body because like it's just it kind of brought me back to like my songwriting days of like really, I got to get this out. This is the only way that I can function day to day. When I was growing up, I had my grandmother used to sing to me, and she was from Italy, and she used to sing to me, and she used to tell me to record her with a tape recorder so I would remember her. And I started thinking about that, like, about what I was leaving behind to the people close to me and to just what I was leaving behind as a human, and that kind of became this thing where I just wanted to like let myself sing like one last time. So, which I know is so sad, but the happy thing is that I was able to get through it. And the album kept shifting because as I was healing and as I was like, realizing I'm gonna get through this, the album became like this story about, getting through it. I feel like this album's like a documentary, like, where the ending can go anywhere. And I didn't sit down with this whole concept at first, like I kind of tend to with albums. It was just like, this is what's happening. And it just unfolded in this really, I think, a beautiful way. I say that not about the music, I say it about the connection I had with the people with me along the way.
I do think it works out that way in the music as well, because before I first listened to it, I only knew the general story that it birthed from your fight with cancer. And in hearing knowing the name of it, So She Howls, I was like, this could really go a number of different ways. And I think there is a lot of conflict earlier on in the album.
Mm,
And so again, you're listening, you're like, what path is this going to go? And then you get halfway through into like, Machine Dreams maybe, and then it sort of
starts to
pivots.
shift. Yeah.
Exactly, it pivots into like a hopefulness, and then you get to, especially like highlighted by that last track. So I do think it works out well like that, and it's
Yeah.
nice,
Thank you.
hearing something that takes that sort of positive journey, but isn't afraid to really like shy away from the darker moments as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. The album, like the vocals that I did, like especially like on the track "So She Howls" and the vocals of me, a lot of them were just like one take vocals. Basically, I was just like
Mm.
like singing. Of course, like the editor and me at the end's like, should I go back and like redo that or not? And I decided like not to. I decided to just preserve the raw emotion and energy in those moments and I just felt like that would be more powerful for the album and for the listener to hear that vulnerability in my voice and in the imperfections. That kind of led me to, thinking about who my collaborators would be.
And it's an interesting piece you mention of like wanting those imperfections in there, because I think
Mm,
for whether it be for music or any other sort of art, we're consistently and continually going down this path of trying to have everything be perfect and
yeah,
really produced and sanding down all the grain and everything. And it's, I don't know, that sort of thing. I mean, maybe it works in certain genres or instances, but I feel
yeah.
like the more you do that, the more it kind of takes away from like the human aspect of it all.
Yeah, which we know is such a right now with AI, it's
Yeah.
like, it's flavorful to have these imperfections, it adds so much. And I think it's like a pathway to connection, honestly, with people. I think people are vulnerable and, and want to connect. And I think that can really help.
And I do want to step back to something you said a minute ago about your grandmother asking you to record those
Yeah.
moments. Did you ever end up doing that?
I did, yeah, I would just on a tape recorder, record her singing all these Italian folk songs,
Mm.
and it was so amazing because she was so she grew up on, like, farmland, so she wasn't, like, a trained singer or anything, but she would sing it with this, like, robust vibrato and, and it would just be so heartfelt and it was just beautiful, but that kinda reminded me thinking about that, like, what recording is, like, we're capturing something, we're capturing this moment, and I felt like this is what's happening right now with this album, like, I'm just capturing what I'm going through. So I wanted to really preserve as much as I could of that time.
And it's funny her singing these folk tales because I think for so many places we're also sort of losing those types
Yeah.
of connections to like a an older world as well. I mean, it reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with the Italian author Italo Calvino. He
Yeah.
40 years ago did a this massive tome, that thick of all these Italian folk tales from over the centuries, and so it's so that kind of serves the dual purpose of the memory of her and also sort of like a preservation of these songs and this knowledge as well. But you mentioning that there's a worry or like a pessimism of it being your last thing, like the idea of that,
Right.
but it's also even if that were the case, like it's such a powerful gift and way to memorialize
Yeah.
yourself and leave yourself behind as well.
Yeah, and I think something that I was really getting into, which kinda led me to the end of the album, was, like, the ability to go through something hard, whatever the trauma is, and be able to remember it and take the time to go and get through it. I felt like I needed to do that. I couldn't just, like, move on. Like, for me, like, having gone through cancer, there was, like, the physical aspect of it, which totally sucked, but the really hard part was the mental part, the aftermath. With trauma, like, how do we get through that? I feel like you have to remember and you have to, like, go back there sometimes to be able to move forward.
And do you think there's like a moment where you're ever truly through it and it's entirely behind you, or is there always like a remnant of it kind of hanging on?
I think it becomes a part of you, hopefully for the better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me it has. I think I have a whole new outlook as a person and as a composer. Like, I've opened up as a composer to this like world of music therapy and thinking about frequencies in a different way. That's really exciting to really dive into this. And I feel like a student of it now because it's like so new to me, but I'm excited about it. It gives you perspective and gratitude, I know that word gets thrown out a lot, but I think it's
Yeah.
true, I think there's so many things to be grateful for.
What do you mean when you're saying like music is therapy and frequencies and things like that?
Yeah, I started to explore with like different techniques, like one being binaural beats for this album, where, a lot of times, with that, you listen on headphones because you basically have two frequencies coming at you. And the difference between those frequencies can put you in a different mental state. I find that so fascinating. So I was, really starting to experiment with that. And also when I was working on this album, especially like towards the stages of thinking about bringing on musicians and really kind of finalizing the arrangements and stuff, I was really thinking about where I was laying in the frequency range of because I was testing myself out personally. Like right now, I need less anxiety in my life. So what can I do to like get this into that mental state, and so it was really experimenting with that type of thing. And I mean, it's so much to learn there. It's a new world and it's exciting for me, yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Like, the more that I hear about and learn from like a very surface level of different, whether like physical, literal approaches or more philosophical approaches to music, I always step back and I'm like, come on, there's just so much out there. It's not just like picking up a piano and banging away.
Yeah, and I think that's really you're right on with that, and I think, like, also as, like, I always say, like, film composing and solo work feeds each other, and, like, with the solo work, I'm able to really experiment and hopefully bring these techniques into what I'm doing as a film composer. I think it makes sense also as a film composer
Yeah.
to be able to tap into this world.
Well, and so on that aspect, how do you strike a balance, or I mean, is there a balance, or is there a separation of worlds between Carla, the film composer, and Carla, the solo musician, the songwriter?
The thing there is, it took a tragic thing for that to really become clear because, for the past 10 years, I had been working a lot on film scores and just plugging away. And as we all know, we get into that world. It's one project done, next project's in, let's go, right? But, it took something really personal to happen to me to say, actually, I need some space for myself. And, one of the things that I learned out of this type of situation is how I do need a balance in my life and I do need this space. And so I really do believe that they both feed each other and that for me, it is a necessity to have both. So I'm trying to balance that out more and I'm working on another album too. So that's Carla 2.0 is what I call myself. Past, we should all be 2.0 past COVID,
Well, no, and I mean, I appreciate that, and it goes exactly into what you were saying about coming out of this with a new
Yeah.
perspective and view, and it's sounding like at least it's a change for the better as well.
Yeah, yeah. Just something I won't go on a whole thing about, but, you know, as composers, sometimes we kind of abuse ourselves, like, not taking care of our bodies and
Mhm.
not taking care of our mental state, and that's something that I really learned to prioritize, and I think it's made me a better composer because of that. When you're hitting your head against something, like, step away, you know? Go for your walks and make sure you have life in there.
Yeah, I mean it does blow my mind some of the timelines on projects of
Oh, I know.
scoring a feature in a couple weeks, if that, and when you're getting right down to it, having to just pull these like crazy days of nonstop work, and I always think the same thing sometimes of like at some point you've got to be just like spinning the wheels, stuck, and not making
Yeah.
any forward progress on your 15th hour of trying to compose or write music during the day.
Yeah. It's very tough to find that way of stepping away or just it feels risky, right? Like when you're in a
Yeah.
deadline to say, I'm going to go out for a walk right now and look at the listen to the birds or whatever. But I think something about cancer has like given me that okay to do that. And that experience really like taught me that my mind and body has to be great in order to compose great music. And it's hard to take that risk to realize that, but
Yeah.
I was forced into it. So
I mean, but the thing is, though, it makes sense. Like,
yeah.
just thinking
Yeah.
about it, you're like, yeah, being in a better physical and mental space or state would probably lead to better results.
Better results, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it seems obvious, but
Yeah, I
like you
know.
said, there's a risk as well, right?
Right.
And so one of the thing on So She Howls, obviously you weren't writing this for the goal of having awards, attention, all that. So what was your reaction or like your response to the nomination and then to coming away and winning the Grammy as well?
I was just, I was surprised like by like my colleagues who took the time to listen to it. And it wasn't until the Grammy Award that I had mentioned cancer, but just so many people are dealing with different traumas. And I think
Yeah.
there was connection there. People connected with that. I felt like this wonderful like community actually, like in connection to people. And it's just pretty amazing to have that. It's like you with this podcast, like you're creating this community of composers and yeah, like that's really a beautiful thing to have this place where we can all connect.
Well, I'll say while I appreciate that, I think the community that built up around that album, that response is,
Oh.
I wouldn't compare what I do to that, but
Oh.
I'll take it either way.
Oh, that's great.
I know that it was, what was it, 6 8 weeks ago. Have you noticed like an impact after winning of doors opening more attention, or has it kind of gone back to business as usual for you?
Yeah, I think doors have been opening a bit more. A few labels have, reached
Mm,
out to me since this and are interested in the new album. And so that's really cool. So there's this like, I feel like there's this space for me to really keep doing my solo work. I think with film projects, it does open the door for you when, all of a sudden you have, this Grammy credit,
yeah,
which is, is really cool. I think for me personally, it's given me momentum as a human being, like I'm still like, wow, I went from that to this. It's made me believe in myself. I know that's kind of weird, but to say out loud, but it really made me believe in myself because I feel like if I can come back from that, and hopefully other people out there who are listening to this realize, like, look, if I can come back from that, you can come back from it. Like I'm just trying to ride that momentum of just being stronger, being better with myself.
and I was gonna say, I don't even think like while we're both laughing while you're saying like it made you believe in yourself. At the same time, I think it's such a valid thing to appreciate that affirmation because whether you're looking at a film scoring career or trying to do anything in music more broadly, and again, I'm saying this mostly at this point as someone just like on the outside, but it's such a long journey and one that I think so often you can go years and years and years and years without that sort of affirmation or outsiders being like, yeah, this was good.
Yeah.
There's just so much music, so many films, it's so easy for things to kind of disappear as well.
I feel like in my whole, like, career that the biggest things or the best things that have happened to me have been unexpected. It's just how it goes, like, I feel like, either I was in the right place or something happened and I wasn't thinking about the award or I wasn't thinking
Yeah.
about the recognition. It was just something raw that I was experiencing, and I think that's really a inspiration to, like, hey, like, live your life and keep doing what you're doing. Maybe things aren't so structured.
It's not like there's a linear path where year one this will happen, year five this will like it's just roundabout winding and so much of it is doing a good job and being persistent and
Yeah.
maybe something like unexpected and great will happen. But
Yeah.
you're in that same boat of having a bit of an unusual path of getting to this point where I think you did begin in more of a songwriting career and then eventually, after, I don't know, however long wanted to get into
Yeah.
film. And I actually saw that Laura Cartman was one of your professors.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to her a
She's
few months ago about the marvels in American fiction. Like,
Yes, I heard that. It was
oh,
great.
great, thank you. And so like talking to her, I can imagine that like she'd be a great professor and
Oh,
role
yeah.
model mentor as well.
Oh my gosh, Laura and Nora, the both of
Mm,
them together, they, have taught me so much. And, I was really lucky to have studied with them. I did a master's in film scoring in 2012, I think it was, yeah. And it was so great to connect with them. And then I started my film composing career assisting Laura and Nora. So
oh,
yeah, so it was so great, and talk about someone who's I remember going into her studio as an assistant and her being like, "You have a great voice," like, and she would always just say, "You're gonna go like this." She'd put her hands on her throat and be like, "Start singing." She just knew how to, like, help people, I feel like, find their strengths and also just inspire them, and when it was time, she's like, "Now go do your own thing," And so I felt like she really, like, brought me in and then
mm,
said, "Go do your own thing," in a very nice way, and so I'm forever grateful to her. And the turning point for me was I was doing, like, a bunch of band work back in the day from songwriting and writing songs for TV. I also just wrote albums that got placed on TV.
mm,
So I was doing that for a while, and then a real pivot point for me was at South by Southwest one year. I ended up performing in a parking lot right before Sandra Bernhard, who, if you don't know her, is a comedian, musician. I was a huge fan, so I was, like, completely floored to be there, and she ended up liking my band, and I ended up going on tour with her. And this is actually where, like, I started to pivot as a
Mm,
songwriter into, writing music to support a story. In her show, it was very much like just stories. It was the whole narrative throughout her show. So, and that kind of opened the door for me of thinking of composing in this way. I love film scores, so it kind of started to grow into that area too. Now I love it. I'm addicted to it. It's
mm. Well, and again, on theme, talking about completely unexpected things
right.
happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, looking back on that experience, were there aspects of that that you were able to pull on or use as like initial stepping stones in developing your skills as a film composer, or is that like a different enough where it kind of sits maybe in parallel rather than like overlapping?
Actually, I really feel them connected. And I think for me, there was a big musical growth at that point when I started playing with Sandra. And what it was listening. And, I started to really listen as a musician and figure out where there was space and where, maybe, I shouldn't be trying to overwrite, right? I think that's just something, that's really helped me get into film scoring and kind of sit there with a film and really evaluate first the arc of the film and what the film needs as opposed to just theme after theme and really overwriting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there is like a some element or some amount of compulsion where it's like writing music is my job, so I should be writing music.
Right.
Then you get to a point where you're like, maybe silence or at least an absence of music is right here.
Yeah. It's funny because when I first started working with Sandra, I would write all these arrangements out and bring them out and give them to the band. And then she would come in and be like, "Yeah, scratch that. Let's just vamp here and let's do this." And then I was like, "Oh, okay." Like sometimes we think like, it has to be hard, right? We really worked on that cue and we like put so much into it. And sometimes it's easy being able to accept that, maybe there's a cue you come in and you just really write it really fast and it's perfect for it. It's not like some big piece that you're going to have, but it's what that cue is supposed to be. Yeah, story wins.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it reminds me of some score examples like, Neil Young's score for Dead Man,
I
or
love that
God,
score.
I can't remember off the top of my head who did the score for Elevator to the Gallows, but both of those are
Mm.
basically like doing like one or two improv passes and then calling it a day. And
Yeah.
it's like you did that in like one night, and like
Yeah.
they just end up being incredible pieces that probably couldn't replicate if you had 2 months to sit down and like think through and sit down and just write.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm trying, I just had a discussion yesterday about AI, and so it's been at the back of my head and, like but I think, like, this type of creation is something that can't really be
Yeah,
replicated. I really wanna push myself to be in that space. It's one of those things where I think we, as composers, keep saying, to ourselves, like, "This has to be elaborate." You have to really, like, go full
yeah,
blown, and not to say that everything should be minimal or whatever, but I think being okay with it when it needs to be that. At least for me, I will say, like, that was something I had to work on and will have to work on forever.
but hopefully you'll also get those chances where it calls for being really elaborate, and then you get to go,
Right.
yes, I've been
This is
waiting
my
for this.
moment.
I get to go wild.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, and I feel like scores usually have that,
Yeah,
so it's pacing yourself.
like at this point you've mentioned AI a couple times, and it's like come up tangentially in
Yeah,
some of what we're saying. Frankly, I hate all the generative AI shit that I keep like seeing pop up and
right.
people pushing. How do you get that out of your mind? Because I can imagine that as someone that's composing music, like that there's
Yeah.
this loud cadre of people that want to just replace all the artists has to drive you crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think of it as like I grew up in a pizza place. So my parents owned a pizzeria. So I start to think of it like to me it takes me down like this corporate lane of like Pizza Hut and like the
Mm,
mom and pop shop down the block, which, there's imperfections, right?
yeah.
it's not frozen pizza. It's like, really crafted and there's so many intricacies to it. And yeah, maybe someday AI is probably going to catch up to that at some point. But I think just leaning into that human element that we have is kind of this thing that's given me some peace. Actually, hey, my imperfections are
Yeah.
are worth something, you know? I think that's given me some ease at least. I mean, everything right now that I've heard with AI is just it's not very original, So I think it's gonna push us as artists to just keep
Mm,
being fresh and keep exploring new things. But that being said, a lot of us, we do make money with library music, and that is just part of our income as keeping our studio lights on. And I
yeah.
think this is where it becomes a real challenge. And I'm more concerned too, still, that we haven't caught up to the Spotify and the Apple Music and, how this really is sustainable for us.
And that's the thing, like now seeing the generative AI coming up while streaming is still unresolved,
Right,
being paid whatever it is, a third of a cent for each stream that doesn't necessarily go into your pocket, like that goes into the
right.
pool of label studio. And yeah, I mean, I don't I don't know. That is like such another giant conversation that like
Yeah,
I sit back and I go like I feel really conflicted because like I also use Spotify, but I also like buy
I know.
probably 50 or 100 albums a year as well. And like if other people just like bought more stuff, it might be all right. But at the same time, like the convenience of someone being able to pay whatever it is, $10 or $15 a month to access all
Everything
music
is
ever. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like as the listener, it's also in one sense it's such a no brainer deal, which
Yeah.
sucks, frankly.
Well, I think too, it's the technology of it's great, like it's great that, we could access all this, but
Yeah.
the laws behind it aren't. I don't know. I feel like if I would pay $100 a year, as opposed to 15 and that went to artists, I still think it would be worth it to have access to all that music. But yeah, it's a big, big conversation.
Yeah. And on a similar note, you've scored a number of projects, primarily shorts, like some more features recently. I think Porno was the first
Mm.
release that you had, and I can't remember if that was 2020, maybe 2022, a couple years ago.
Yeah, 2020, yeah.
Okay. And then
Yep,
after that, you've had a couple of short film scores or singles from them being released. So like having additional label attention, even if it's technically directed at the upcoming album, I assume that maybe gives studios or labels more interest in releasing your score music as well. How
yeah.
important is it for you to have scores going forward have releases?
I love it. More storytelling that's coming out, and I think there's a sharp difference. For example, I just put out a score for a film called Everybody Dies
Hmm.
Sometimes, which is very, like, whimsical, kinda cute, and it's different from So She Howls,
Yeah.
but I think that's okay, and I really love having a space to share that with people, and I think for the film Porno, that was really fun because I got to collaborate with Lakeshore, who have always, loved that label, and I think it does, like, reach maybe slightly different audiences,
Hmm.
but it's still me. Even personally, like with shorts, I love doing it because I think a lot of times, shorts don't get the attention. I
Yeah.
personally really love shorts, and it's cool to get people to be like, "Oh, I wanna go see that film," or vice versa if they're at a festival and they wanna go hear it.
It is like a frustrating thing of trying to find good shorts because you go on YouTube and there's 45 million short films on there and maybe a few thousand of them are good and it's like
Yeah,
how do I wade through all this and not have to do a hit rate of 1 in 100 and just like see what's going to be
right.
good. I know that you had recently scored a or short film Maxine on Disney and so
Yeah.
it's like nice seeing some of the streamers hosting shorts. I used to watch a lot on Amazon. A few years ago, they had a lot of Tribeca shorts, I think.
Yeah.
So I always hope that there will be more of a home on those or for
Yeah, it
those
would be
on some of the
amazing.
major platforms like that.
I saw, like, after COVID, it kinda grew, like, all of a
Hmm.
sudden, there were shorts. When I go to a film festival, I always go to the shorts program.
Oh,
It's just so fun. I just love that whole medium, and I think the more that I guess there was space that we needed content during
yeah.
COVID, so it was great to see those films come up, and yeah, I just really love that space, and hopefully the soundtrack world, I hopefully I can tell my people about these films, and it's really grassroots, which is exciting, you know?
What is it that interests you so much about shorts? Because obviously, like a lot of composers for the first however many years are regularly scoring short films, but for you,
Yeah.
it's obvious like you're not just scoring them as more work, you also just genuinely love the medium.
Yeah, because it's like it's so focused on this, like, element that could later be, like, a feature or
Mm,
whatever, but it's just this one point, like, that we're really bringing across, this one theme. I love that because it's like, you can kind of experiment within that theme throughout the film, but you don't have to go too far, you don't have to you're really, like, just focused and more. Also, it leaves room to imagine. I like to when I see a filmmaker's short, I'm like, "Oh, this is so cool." Like, I can imagine, like, their feature would be and but also just have this little thing that is fun. And in the program, you go from one if it's curated nicely, there's a big theme within these shorts that kinda connects
okay.
them, which is really cool. So so I love seeing that when you got someone really cool who put thought into putting it together.
And that has to present an extra challenge scoring them because like I watched Maxine this morning and so that's obviously it's really focused, it's 15
Yeah.
minutes, 15-20 minutes, and yet your score has to jump around a lot stylistically and
Yeah.
genre-wise, and you're introducing like on occasion different musical genres, different instruments as well, and I've got to imagine it's tough to strike a balance of like hitting all those notes, but it also not being like this chaotic mash of
Chaotic
different music.
mesh of different
Exactly. Yeah.
music. Yeah, you still build your palette, and you still have, like, the palette of the score, and then I felt like, if Maxine turned into a feature, we pretty much have the themes ready to go and to blossom into something, but finding your instrumentation, when I do that in the beginning, I start messing with different palettes, is so fun, and to be able to find, like, the voice, at least, like, the beginning voice, where it's gonna start from is really cool, and, I had so much fun with that film. It was, like, such a treat to be able to work with so many different musicians and to work on a subject that really resonates with me. I was really proud of that, I have nieces and these young kids, like, anyone struggling with
Yeah.
themselves having this film, kudos to Disney for doing it.
Well, and that was another thing I wanted to ask of because Maxine's an example of it, but you having an interest in working on films that have a more diverse representation, and I think like
Yeah.
Maxine is a good example where it's not just this story of this young woman coming out and being comfortable with herself around her family, but also there's a number of different ethnicities in there. It's an immigrant family. It's touching all those things, and so how important is it for you to be working on
Yeah.
projects that have that to whatever extent?
Yeah, I mean, it really is important to me being a gay woman. I've been not seen or heard so I think it's really important to do what I can to move this forward. I think about specifically with this film, I thought about myself as a little kid who couldn't come out and let alone have a conversation with my family about it. And I think it's important for me as a gay woman to invest in that, to take my time to give to that. And it also moves me, and films to me also a lot of times when, I connect with them, it's like there's something that usually hits me inside that is making me think a lot about myself. I did a short film back in 2018. I actually made it with my partner. It was about, Latte Reiniger, a film pioneer before Disney, actually. She created the first feature-length animation, and that's kinda where I started to realize I really wanna, like, support work that tells these stories that are either have not been told or, need to be more at the forefront of what we're hearing these days.
It is interesting how important that is. Like, so my wife's a high school teacher, and I don't even remember how it came up. Maybe we were watching The Shining, and afterwards I was like telling her a little bit about Wendy Carlos, and
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I had no idea about that, and I think that's the case on so many of these things where when you're involved in the particular medium, it seems known, and then you take a step back and you're like, oh no, most people have no idea. Like before this, I was looking up Reiniger as well, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I had no idea
Yeah.
she had this like huge impact 80, 90 years ago. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I know, it's pretty how that story is pretty interesting because I had finished Berkeley and done, my master's thesis on Lottie Reiniger because I had come across her work and, they brought you here to LA to record it at Warner Brothers and all that, and I had gone to film festivals with it afterwards because it was a 1922 silent film that I scored, and nobody at the animations I went to SCAD, Savannah College, all animators there, and they didn't know her, and I was like, "How do you not
Oh
know?"
my gosh.
how is she not, like, taught in, like, animation history 101,
Yeah.
and or whatever, and then, thinking about, of course, women composers, it's like I was like, "Yes, like, I have to make this film," and for me, it's a path of, like, what do I wanna communicate with my work, and what do I wanna be a part of, and so it is very important to me.
I appreciate that because I think it's easy to instead like have the idea that someone that's composing for film is there in like a secondary supplemental role, and not realizing despite that you can still have a voice in
Yeah.
these types of issues as well, or whatever other issues too.
Yeah, I think even though, like, we're doing work for hire, there's this artistry and ourselves are coming through these films. You can feel it when something's really resonating with someone who's making something. And then the director can feel it, I think. I always say, like, working with a director is like, for me, at least in my experience, it's like working with a band. You have new band member and you're forming a new band together. That chemistry has to be there and that you have to be connected to it.
I definitely think it comes through as well. Whether it's just the director, or when a composer has a passion for something, there's an indescribable subconscious way, like you can hear that come through.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, Carla, on that note, I'll leave it be. It's always nice to end on something more positive and uplifting. So, so thank you so much for sitting down chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.